Radio Lewes. Local webcasting for a worldwide audience.
Hello, I'm Richard.
And I'm Matt.
In this show, we'll look at some of the music that we love and that's influenced our lives. We'll go back a decade at a time. And this week, well, we're kind of going to destroy the entire premise of the show by not going back a decade at a time. We're going back to the 80s, but I think we've both decided that this decade was so important to us that we're actually going to split the 80s in two. So we're going to do 80 to 84 this week, and then we're going to do 85 to 89 next week. And I think one thing we didn't explain last week, Matt, is that obviously we've been very, very good friends, very close friends for very many years. And the 80s, the early 80s, mid 80s is when we kind of first got to know each other, right?
That's right. And this section of the 80s ends in the year that we met.
Ah, does it? Right.
Yes,
okay.
it does.
Okay. But I think, as we'll see with the choices that we've made, we were both listening to very similar things in those like 4 or 5 years before we met.
Absolutely. I was in the north, you were in the south, and yet still we were listening to the same stuff.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Because
yeah.
we both had exceptional taste.
Well, that's it. It's a shame mine has fallen off the wagon quite a lot in the last few years. But let's get started on the first one then. So, as I say, we're looking at 1980 to 1984, and we're looking at some of the songs and the artists that have meant something to us. So it's not necessarily our very favourite songs or very favourite artists at the time, but it's the ones that have really kind of meant something and had an influence on us since. So what's your first one?
So my first one is kind of an obvious one because it's the answer to that question that everybody always asks you. What was the first album that you owned? And this was Adamant off Friend or Foe, and it's Goody Two Shoes. I was a big Adamant fan beforehand, obviously, because everybody of our age was. Everybody was painting white stripes across their nose with Tipp-Ex and doing the Prince Charming dance in the playground. But this was his first solo album. And Goody Two Shoes was just a big bouncy pop tune with a slightly naughty video that I didn't understand at the time, with a butler peering through a keyhole at Adamant's girlfriend at the time, who was Amanda Donahoe, who was an actress. And it's just a really fun, up-bouncy tune. It was like, it felt a little bit like he'd sort of been let off the leash a bit. You kind of felt the freedom of him going solo for the first time. Not that I understood that at the time. I just used to jump around in my room to it.
I used to love Adamant, and I think it's one of those things, it's one of those choices this week where, you know, it would have been on my list if it wasn't on your list, Adamant. And it was one of the, I suppose Adamant was one of the first things I was into really, really big time, you know, just really massively into him. And it was also the first LP I ever had. It wasn't Friend or Foe though. Mine was Kings of the Wild Frontier. And yeah, I remember that vividly because I got the version with it. There was a kind of there was a booklet that came with it, and I think I've still got the vinyl copy on my shelves now. But it's in a terrible condition. It's been 40 years of horror attached to it. But yeah, just amazing tunes and just really different. I mean, I think I really liked the kind of the drums, you know, the Burundi beat stuff that I think it was Malcolm McLaren, wasn't it, that he sort of suggested to Adam to do that. And I thought, yeah, Kings of the Wild Frontier was a fantastic album, and so I loved them. And I even remember where I was when I first heard Stand and Deliver. And again, it was just, I think, yeah, when you were 9 or 10, it was just the most exciting thing, you know, just really exciting time to be into pop music, I think. Well, anyway, so let's crack on with Adamant then. This is Goody Two Shoes.
Send a treasure token, write it on a pound note. Goody two shoes, goody two shoes. Don't drink, don't smoke, what do? You don't drink. is something inside.
Oh my goodness, Adamant, that was amazing. Good choice. Good choice.
You saw him live quite recently, didn't you?
Seen him a few times actually.
Yeah, I've seen him live. Is he good?
He's absolutely amazing. Because I was a bit worried, that he'd be this sort of slightly decrepit creature, sort of crawling onto the stage and being a bit rubbish. But he was amazing because he had really young musicians with him. He had the two drummers. Just really, really brilliant. And he also didn't compromise. He played some of the hits, but he also played quite a few of the old punk sort of songs that he did, and some B-sides and like fan favorites. So it wasn't all sort of the big hits, but it was fantastic. And I think he's doing really well on that now. He's in quite a lot of demand. And one of the things that I was really pleased about is I went to see him at a sort of family festival a couple of years ago with my daughter.
Oh, right.
And she thought he was awesome. She'd never heard one of his records, but she just thought he was the best. So I was very gratified to see that.
What's not to like? He's a guy dressed up as a pirate variously and singing bouncy songs and lots and lots of drums.
Yeah, respect to Ant. Amazing. Right, so on to my first one now, and I've gone for something a bit more electronic-y, and again, it's a classic thing for people of this sort of age. It's the Human League, and I used to really love the Human League, and it wasn't because I had lots of their records, I don't think, at the time, but I remember going to a little youth club, a little activity club on a Saturday morning on Hayling Island, which is where we used to live. And I think this was probably before you came down. And we used to be able to kind of like buy sweets and stuff in their little booth in the morning. They also brought, as well as like playing indoor games and stuff, they brought like a box of knackered old 7-inch singles and an old stereo with them, and you could put some of the singles on. And I think they had a few like Human League songs as in that, and I just really loved them. They were fantastic. So this one is one of my favorite Human League tunes. This is The Sound of the Crowd. What did you think of the Human League?
Now we have a little bit of a difference of opinion about the Human League, I think. We've discussed this before in the past. Being Boiled, no doubt, it's a classic used by Richard X to great effect many years later. It's just a brilliant tune. But explain Phil Oakey to me. The man is built like a brick outhouse, sings like a plumber, and has an asymmetrical haircut. I don't get it. I've tried to get it many times, and it's probably just my taste, but I can't get past the singing builder.
Wow. Well, we're going to have to re-educate you. We have to do a bit of like mind control or something. But yeah, no, I really love the Human League. It still stands up today. But they got an LP. There was a bit of a trend in the early mid 80s for remix LPs or kind of fairly basic remix LPs, and Love and Dancing was the Human League's one, which was a kind of instrumental extended mixes from Dare. Their seminal LP, and that is a brilliant LP. It's really good, that remix LP. So
kind of similar to Soft Cell did one, didn't
non-stop ecstatic dancing. Yeah, much better than that. Much better.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So go for it. Even if you don't like the plumber belting out the hits, you don't have much of the plumber on that one. Anyway, so here's the Human League and Sound of the Crowd.
Your hand in a parting wave, pass around. Make a shroud pulling come through a backwash frame. Rays from a pencil pier pass around. A fold in an eyelid brushed with beer. The lines on a compact guide pass around. A hat with alignment worn inside. Get in line now, get in line now. Stay in time with the rhythm and rhyme. Get around town where the people look good, where the music is loud. Get around town, no need to stand proud. Add your voice to the sound of the crowd. Get in line now. Stay in time with the rhythm and rhyme. Get around town where the people look good, where the music is loud. Get around town, no need to stand proud. Add your voice to the sound of the crowd. Get in line now. Stay in time with the rhythm and rhyme. Get around town where the people look good, where the music is loud. Get around town, no need to stand proud. Add your voice to the sound of the crowd.
Right, there you go. That was the Singing Plumber. Hope you enjoyed that. Phil, what have you got? What have you got?
Phil,
For,
innit?
what have you got for your second track then?
What have we got next? I think, isn't it? I think it's Frankie Goes to Hollywood next.
Ooh,
Oh God, again, just two tracks. I remember Relax coming out, and my sister's husband at the time had a massive record collection, and he bought Relax before it kind of was banned. And obviously, again, had no idea what it was about at all, but just loved the sound of it. And then Two Tribes came out, and it was like a massive movie on vinyl, from the kind of opening sirens all the way through, and that massive, massive riff. And then the video, which was like 15 minutes long, and it was Khrushchev and Reagan fighting in a sort of a wrestling ring. And then the world explodes at the end. But it's just still now, it's a song that I listen to quite a lot now. And there was a moment where I was kind of embarrassed to like Frankie Goes to Hollywood, but couldn't help myself. But not now. It still sounds just fantastic and huge, you know. And these guys, they had what, 4 number 1 singles in the space of 4 months. You know, they shone very, very brightly for a very short period of time, and then sort of disappeared and left this incredible legacy of massive hits behind them. And of course, it was Trevor Horn producing. Trevor Horn, who I think is probably the first producer that we were aware of, really. He was kind of the first producer that I would go out and buy a single that he produced. You know, it's Frank Goes to Hollywood, Propaganda, Act, and also The Art of Noise, who are going to come up in a little minute as well. So there you go. Yeah, Frank, Two Tribes, total classic. You can't leave Two Tribes off an 80s list either.
I think, I mean, we could do an entire show on Frankie Goes to Hollywood, possibly even more than one show, in fact. Just we could do a show on each of the singles that we bought from there, because that sort of became an obsession of ours, didn't it, really, of buying, this whole thing with the marketing machine where Paul Morley was involved in bringing out loads of different versions of tunes and different remixes and stuff. That was just absolute, sort of catnip to us as kind of 13-year-olds who, it was just the perfect thing that we were really, because it was exciting to go, oh, well, what, where is that new version of that? And it was, some of this stuff was quite hard to get hold of. It's not like now where if you want to hear a remix, you just type the name of the remix in and it's there for you. You had to really search it out. And sometimes it just you might not be able to find them in a shop, or you might have to pay ridiculous amounts of money. So it was a proper kind of like treasure hunt for some of this stuff. And it was quite exciting, really.
It was. Do you remember it was the Hibakusha mix, which was almost legendary. We'd read about it. I used to buy Record Collector. I think we used to share a copy of Record Collector between us every month and go through and look at, what the hell is that? The Hibakusha mix of Two Tribes. Oh my God. And of course, MP3s weren't around, so there's no way you were going to be able to find it and download it. I never heard it. I didn't hear it until it came onto Apple Music a couple of years ago. That was the first time I'd heard it. And obviously it's a bit disappointing.
Yes,
after nearly 40 years.
Endless mystery you've been pursuing for the last 40 years, and it's, that's it.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah. Oh, that's great. No, so we could go on forever about it. But anyway, here is Two Tribes, Frankie Goes to Hollywood.
living in a land where sex and horror are the new gods. Yeah. When two times go to war, a pretty song you score.
Yeah, there it is. There it is. Two Tribes by Frank Goes to Hollywood. Superb, superb stuff. So my second tune is Duran Duran. And Duran Duran, I think, are one of those bands that are kind of slightly unfairly maligned at times as being, just a pop band. And I mean, they are a bunch of muppets sometimes. I mean, Simon Le Bon is a bit of a silly boy, and they're quite laughable, right? In some ways, there's lots to laugh at about them, but actually, they made some of my favourite songs. I've only realised this in actually kind of compiling this week's show, thinking, well, I can't choose a song from them for this because they've done so many things that have inspired me, and that I've never seen them live, for example. I would love to see them live doing a greatest hit set, because it would be as good as almost any other band that I know. It would just be fantastic. And I remember them at the time. I remember buying quite a few of their singles at the time, and yet I don't necessarily look back on them as a particularly influential band. Do you know what I mean? It's a strange one. It's a strange one. So I'm putting them in there because I think, they did play quite a big part in my childhood, and I don't really acknowledge that enough. And so I'm going to play a song called The Chauffeur, which is from their Rio LP. And I think for a lot of Duran Duran fans, it's like one of their favorite songs that wasn't released as a single, but it's still a great tune.
They were one of these bands that, again, I was sort of negatively influenced by my sister because she loved Duran Duran early on, and I was at the point where anything that my sister was into, I plainly wasn't. So I never appreciated them. But it's kind of around about the time of Notorious, when Notorious came out, and obviously Nile Rodgers was involved in that, and that was just a fantastic album. I suddenly got it, and I went back and I listened to Rio. There's no denying that Rio is just a brilliant tune, and Girls on Film is a great tune. They did have some really good songs. It's just that Simon Le Bon was a bit of a knob, I think, which is a slight problem.
I don't think that's an unfair comment. I think that's pretty reasonable. Yeah,
I probably agree with it, actually.
Anyway, so here they are, Duran Duran and The Chauffeur.
Charming, sweating dewdrops glisten flashing your side, and the sun drips down bedding heavy behind the front of your dress, all shadowy lined, and the droning engine throbs in time with your beating heart. Towards that hollow western isle, my envied lady holds you fast in her gaze, and the sun drips down bedding heavy behind the front of your dress, all shadowy lined, and the droning engine throbs in time with your beating heart. And the sun drips down bedding heavy behind the front of your dress, all shadowy lined, and the droning engine throbs in time with your beating heart. Sing, blue silver. Sun drips time with your beating heart. And the sun droops down, bedding heavy behind the front of your dress, all shadowy line. The droning engine throbs in time with your beating heart. Sing, blue silver. Sing, blue silver.
There's more to this kind of camouflage, more than just color and shape. Who's calling now? And the door comes to you.
Right, that was Duran Duran and the Chauffeur. So we're on the third tune now from the period 80 to 84. And Matt, what have you got?
So this next artist is the first artist that I kind of claimed as my own, really. He was somebody that not everybody liked. And initially I kind of got into Nick Kershaw because there was a girl that I fancied at school who liked Nick Kershaw. So I didn't really like him because I didn't really know his music. And then I heard Dancing Girls. And it kind of came from the same place as lots of, a little bit as Frank has told about, I suppose, just from the point of view of really intricately kind of produced electronic soundy stuff that sounded like it come from the future. And it has this amazing sort of sequenced rhythmic bit that runs all the way through it that sounds like nothing else. And it really just kind of struck me, this song, as something which was kind of had a funny tone to it. It was slightly melancholic because Nick Kershaw's voice is slightly melancholic, but also kind of really uplifting and something you want to dance to. I talked about my brother last week and about how he's into really heavy metal, and he hated Nick Kershaw, and it was the first thing we kind of fell out about musically.
Oh my gosh!
Because I just thought he was amazing, and he thought he was pop tat. And I think the thing is as well that he kind of he was thrown into the same bucket as people like Howard Jones, who is Howard Jones. I was never really, he was just a bit light, and he was a bit too pop, Howard. He was a bit too sort of aimed at the kind of teenage girls for me being in my early teens, and I just found him a bit light. And also there's no excusing having a mime artist on stage with you. What is Jez, wasn't it? Jed.
Yeah, and if you need a mime artist next to you on stage, you know your music's not quite strong enough, don't you?
It's very true. If you need somebody performing not at all metaphorical songs in chains when you're singing a song about throw off these mortal chains or whatever it was, you know you're not in a good place. None of that for Nick Kershaw. He knew what he was on about, and he knew his songs were good.
I loved Kershaw. Oh, I just loved Kershaw. I still do. And that's funny.
Too.
You know, as records that you go back to repeatedly, I think some of his stuff is probably some of my most played LPs. I love Human Racing. I love The Riddle. These are the LPs. And I actually love Radio Musicola, the one that kind of came after them. And that was a bit of a flop when he was really kind of riding quite high. It was quite a surprise because it's a good LP. But he's just got this way with a melody. So obviously he's quite a muso. You know, he's obviously a proper musician who can write quite complex songs. You know, they weren't sort of always really simple pop songs. They were quite melodically complex. But they just were unique sounding, weren't they? He had that sort of, there was something about the melodies that were just unique. And the thing I really love about him, when you look back on it as well, is that when you see his blogs and websites and stuff now, he's just so self-effacing. He's such a nice guy, and he doesn't take himself too seriously. And it's great. It's just, and I think it was just like a constant throughout the early 80s, you know, just a kind of soothing, it's kind of a soothing thing, isn't it, Kershaw? Yeah.
And he's come to terms with his pop Muppet kind of history as well. And now, you know, he plays the sort of the throwback festivals that we've been to and plays the hits with joy, and they sound as good as they ever did. Radio Musicola, I nearly chose Radio Musicola because it is my favorite Nick Kershaw song, the actual song. But I went for Dancing Girls because it's the one that reminds me of that time the most, and sort of that transitioning into music that was mine.
Brilliant. And it still sounds ace today, as you'll find out now. And there it was. That was Dancing Girls by Nick Kershaw. Fantastic. That is one of his best tunes. It just sounds amazing and fresh, doesn't it, still?
It does. It still sounds great now. I mean, you can imagine any of the kind of the artists these days who were sort of influenced by the 80s, listening to that and thinking, yeah, that's where it came from.
So the next one, my third tune is by Prince, and we are going to return to Prince, I'm sure, in another part of this decade, one or other of us, because Prince, in one way or another, was incredibly influential for both of us, and in sort of the music that we did and the rubbish band that we were in. But I think the reason I've chosen Prince in the sort of early 80s is that it was a kind of constant background to the music that I was listening to. And although I wasn't at that point, the world's biggest fan of it, I really did like quite a lot of his stuff. And I guess it was just, as I say, it was a kind of a theme that flowed through those first few years. That is, when I look back on, 80 to 84, I think, Prince was just right up there. And this is a song from the 1999 LP. No, it's not, is it? This isn't from 1999. This is from Purple Rain. This is
I Would Die For You.
I Would Die For You. This is from Purple Rain.
Yeah.
So 1999 was the other one I was considering putting in. But I love I Would Die For You. I think it's just a really, really fantastic tune. And I think one of the interesting things about Prince is just the sheer diversity of styles that he was able to kind of jump into when he fancied it. And, lots of his LPs have this. They have a kind of one track for one type of genre. They have another track for another. And it's just this incredible. I mean, he was just a complete genius, wasn't he, basically? But I just think there's something really sweet about I Would Die For You. It's a sweet song. It's and it's just got a great tune. And I love it.
You nearly got into trouble this week, Rich. You did. You nearly got into trouble by hopping in there first with Prince. I'm gonna have to save it for next week. He is the one artist that means more to me than any other. But my kind of appreciation of him didn't really start until a couple of years later. So that's why I'm going to give you this one. I'll give you this one. It's all right.
Well, enjoy it. Well, then you can hold back on your Prince stuff, because you've got a bit of a sort of you've got a bit of a dialogue to have about Prince, haven't you? I'm
going to write a whole essay. So next week's show is going to be about 5 hours long, and 4.5 hours is going to be me talking about Prince.
It'll be Prince.
I hope that's okay.
Waxing lyrical about Prince.
Indeed.
Anyway, we both like him, and here's I Would Die For You.
If you evil, I'll forgive you, bye bye, 'cause
Yeah, that was good. That was good. You'll have
Yes.
more of him next week, quite possibly.
Yeah, quite a lot more.
So, Mr. Cole, what have you got for your fourth tune from 80 to 84?
So number 4 is The Art of Noise, and not Moments of Love, which most people choose, but Close to the Edit. And this was a song that hit me because I remember the video first. And the video was this little girl dressed as a punk and 2 guys in a sort of scrapyard beating the crap out of a car and then cutting up a piano with a chainsaw to this just weird noise. The Art of Noise were so far ahead of their time. It was unbelievable. Everything built on samples at a point when samples were only just beginning. Not really trying to have a tune of any sort, just building on a riff and putting these vocal samples into them. And what's extraordinary is that the 3 of them were classically trained musicians, but they just grabbed hold of this electronic equipment that was nascent, just experimented with it, and put out this stuff which could have been terribly pretentious, but there's such a sense of fun underneath it. You know, the bass line's a real sort of kind of almost like a boogie woogie bass line, but really obviously sort of synthetic, and then all these layered vocal samples over the top of it. So it has a sense of fun to it. It's enjoyable, but it's just weird. It sounded like absolutely nothing else at the time. And, you know, The Art of Noise went on to be massively influential, even though they weren't very big. You know, they completely influenced hip hop and electro, which obviously went into house. Beatbox, which was a track off their first album, which is just very, very strange. You know, that's been, you know, Africa Bambaataa talks about that song a lot, about influencing him. And yet they were just these 3 weird nerds mucking around with very expensive electronic equipment and somehow making something brilliant.
I think that's it. I think it's that they were having fun messing about in the studio, weren't they? Because well, one of them was Anne Dudley, who's a really renowned, you know, composer of orchestral stuff and film scores and tons of other stuff. And I think they also, of course, they just discovered the Fairlight synthesizer, so, you know, the sampler. And I think that just putting weird stuff through that. So, you know, the thing you're going to play, Close to the Edit, has got sounds of cars starting, it's got people going, hey, and it's got just samples being played. And it's just, you know, messing about with that. And I think in the last, I think about 5 years ago, I bought a sort of a big kind of compendium of of Art of Noise back catalogue. There's about 4 CDs, and it's got loads of stuff about the demos they did and the odd bits and pieces of stuff they found in the archive. And the songs that you actually hear that were released as singles are really just this kind of pulling together of all the reasonable bits that they'd made from their experiments, because some of the experiments are just them going on the sampler, and there's this and think, right, okay, that'll do, we'll put that in. And when it kind of came together for a few seconds, they went, right, we'll stitch that together with that bit, and suddenly you have a kind of weird song, but it just works, doesn't it? It's just kind of exciting.
It just works. And the apparently the reason it's called Close to the Edit is because it was produced by Trevor Horn, another one, who had just finished doing a little stint with Yes, who had a song called Close to the Edge, which was a typical prog rock 15-minute song that Anne Dudley hated. So they call this Close to the Edit basically to take the mickey out of Trevor Horn and that song.
Ah, nice.
There you go.
Okay, so here you go. The Art of Noise, Close to the Edit.
the edge. To the edge.
Yeah, that brings back memories. The Art of Noise, Close to the Edit. I mean, this stuff is just so evocative, isn't it? I mean, it really is.
Yeah, it's like I said, it sounds like nothing else. And they still, even though the technology advanced, they grew with it, but they still maintained their sound of when they got up to things like Paranoia, and then they sort of skirted around sort of early techno and some of the stuff they did in there. But they always sounded like the Art of Noise.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so on to my fourth one now. And it's from a band that, again, we're going to probably talk at least once or twice more about in the next few weeks, and it's Depeche Mode. And
Yeah.
I can't really think of a band between the two of us that is, you know, probably more important to our memories of, you know, that period of our lives than Depeche Mode, because we listened to a whole lot of them. We also played cover versions of theirs in our rubbish band, and I don't know, I think us and our little group of friends were all pretty obsessed with them, really. And again, buying all the versions of their songs, and this was over quite a kind of long period of time as well. So I loved Depeche Mode from probably about 1981, when they were first doing very simple little plinky plonky songs, which were still great, like Just Can't Get Enough and stuff like that. I loved them at the time. And then as the stuff got more complex, and over the next 10, 20 years, still loved them. Still followed them and still love them. And so I'm putting them in this early part of the 80s because I really did love them then. And I think, again, it's like a throwback to the youth club that I used to go to on a Saturday morning. And that there were things like, I think Leave in Silence was a single that they had, and See You was there, and all these incredible early singles. And there isn't one that I don't like. They're all they all really take me back to that time. So have to have Depeche Mode in there. And the one I've chosen is People Are People. And I see like this is kind of like second phase Depeche Mode, because you had this sort of quite simple stuff like, Just Can't Get Enough and Leave in Silence, and brilliant songs. And then there was like this second phase of where it just got a bit more complex, and it felt a bit more stadium-y. It felt like, wow, these are bigger songs. So you had things like Master and Servant and People Are People. These are, it's like, it's just got a bit more serious and a bit bigger and a bit more grown up, and just love this stuff. Just love it.
So Depeche Mode passed me by initially in the early 80s. And really it was you and our mates that kind of introduced me to them a little bit later on. But it did, I kind of immersed myself completely into them off the back of hearing People Are People. It was the song that kind of hit me. Because it's sort of, it's very, it's not hugely complex lyric writing, but when you're at the age of 14 or however old I was at the time, it did seem to be a song that had a meaning that I understood to it. And it started to, I started to understand that actually, songs can actually mean something. And it was pop, but a bit odd. It just was a bit off. There was a darkness to it that almost didn't belong there. And it just hit me kind of emotionally at that time, really. And then obviously Master and Servant, which you could have chosen. That's a weird one because, again, I kind of understood what it was about, but I sort of felt what it was about rather than understanding what it was about, really. But yeah, People Are People was the first Depeche Mode song that I really got, and I really turned me on to them.
And I think this has also got an Ace 80s type introduction to it as well. So this is People Are People, Depeche Mode. Fantastic. Depeche Mode and People Are People. And already we have reached the fifth song in our choices. This is where it gets so hard because I know there are several that I would have added on to this as well. I'm sure there are probably several more that you would have gone for, but we only have five. So what is your fifth?
This was actually quite easy for me because it is genuinely in my top three songs of all time. And it is Once in a Lifetime by Talking Heads. So again, another one of those songs. We were sort of hitting peak 80s video at the time, and this video is just, You know, it is a classic, and it's a classic because it's just pure David Byrne being David Byrne in a way only David Byrne can. So obviously my attention was drawn to that. Weird thing was, everybody in my family loved this song as well. My mum and dad loved this song, which is kind of strange considering it. What can you say about it? Talking Heads are just, you know, massively influential. Again, only when you listen to them deeper do you get the sort of the world music stuff, the kind of African rhythms that are involved, that David Byrne was very keen on. The scale of the amount of musicians involved, the fact that they sort of they brought together a sort of new wave sensibility, but pop music and electronic stuff going on in there as well. So it was a real mishmash of all sorts of stuff. Probably one of the greatest bass lines of all time. I think Tina Weymouth is really unfairly maligned for his bass playing because she just knew how to put a really simple but effective groove together, which was perfect for Talking Heads. And it still sounds like it's come from another universe entirely. This song will never get old. It will never age. It will always be on my list. And God bless it.
I think you've described it really well. And I think it's, you know, I love tons of Talking Heads things. Absolutely love Talking Heads. But this one is by far the one I love the most. By far the one I love. And there is nothing like it. There is nothing like it at all. And I think it's one of those songs that even though, you know, you play it to someone who's 16 now, they probably know it. Even kids now, it'd be the sort of thing that will have percolated down through their parents. At some point they will have heard it. And I think I don't know anybody who doesn't like this song. And because, like you say, it has so many different, I don't know, sort of ways of touching different people. It has like this sort of a funkiness to it. It has a kind of new wave to it. It has a tune. It has like a sing-along tune to it. So even if you're not a big music lover, you know, if you're the sort of person who just occasionally buys records and isn't that into it, you're still going to like it. So it's just an awesome song. And as you say, with the video in it, that just, I think that totally transformed how people consume music as well by having, you know, images going alongside the thing. So if you've got a really arresting image and a really memorable video, that's going to do it. And this one had both, didn't it? So it was no wonder it was so popular.
It's something actually people don't really talk about very much, is the fact that at the same time that you had this sort of bedroom electronic instrument revolution going on, you also had a revolution with video equipment as well. So these sort of analog video mixing equipment that was being used, it was becoming cheaper, that allowed people to do really interesting visual effects, which will look a little bit shonky now, but at the time were amazing, you know, sort of compositing of images and stuff. This was all happening at the same time. So it was everything about pop music at the time was driven by this sudden expansion in technology that pretty much anybody could get their hands on. And, you know, this is probably the most obvious exponent of that. The song sounds like the future. The video was the future at the time, you know.
Well, here we go then. Talking Heads, Once in a Lifetime.
You may find yourself living in a shotgun shack, and you may find yourself in another part of the world, and you may find yourself behind the wheel of a large automobile, and you may find yourself in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife, and you may ask yourself, well, how did I get here? Letting the days go by, let the water hold me down. Letting the days go by, water flowing underground into the blue again. After the money's gone, once in a lifetime, water flowing underground. And you may ask yourself, how do I work this? And you may ask yourself, where is that large automobile? And you may tell yourself, this is not my beautiful house. And you may tell yourself, this is not my beautiful wife. Letting the days go by, let the water hold me down. Letting the days go by, water flowing underground into the blue again. After the money's gone, once in a lifetime, water flowing underground. Same as it ever
Same as it ever was. 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 Same as it ever was.
Letting the days go by. Let the water hold me down. Letting the days go by. Water flowing underground into the blue again. After the body's gone, once in a lifetime. Water flowing underground.
You may ask yourself, what is that beautiful house? You may ask yourself, where does that highway go to? And you may ask yourself, am I right? Am I wrong? And you may say to yourself, my God, what have I done?
Letting the days go by. Let the water hold me down. Letting the days go by. Water flowing underground into the blue again. Into the silent water. Under the rocks and stones. There is water underground. Letting the days go by. Let the water hold me down. Letting the days go by. Water flowing underground into the blue again. After the money's gone. Once in a lifetime. Water flowing underground.
Same as it ever was. Same as it ever was. Same as it ever was. Look where my hand was. Time isn't holding up. Time isn't after us. Same as it ever was. 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 Same as it ever was.
And there you go. Yeah, I think it's in your top 3 songs. It's in my it's in one of my top 10 or 20 at least. It's just amazing tune. So on to my last one, and well, it's Madness. It's Madness, and it's Driving in My Car. And I think the thing about Madness is, again, they were there as the soundtrack to my early teens in the early 80s, and I think again they're really such an underestimated group. And because they're kind of fun and because they're a bit silly, people completely don't just fail to recognize how brilliant the songs are. First of all, how brilliant the songs are. Secondly, how complex these songs are. If you've got a sort of a normal band to do these, and a more sort of po-faced serious band, that people would be really admiring them. They'd say, well, this is such immensely clever musicianship and complex, songs. And it's Madness who've got a flying saxophonist. They go, look at that guy, he's flying. It rather takes away from it. But I loved Madness, and they did, I think, as a singles band, they are probably one of the very best singles bands in the last 30, 40 years, I would say. They so many brilliant singles. And I think this is just one of my favorite singles of theirs. It's just great.
It was the thing about Madness was that they sort of cultivated willingly the Nutty Boys persona, where they just came across as being, like you say, a bit novelty, but they weren't. And when they were at the top of their game, they were brilliant, and they wrote songs which were really moving as well. Obviously they didn't write "It Must Be Love," that was Larry Sifry, but their version of "Must Be Love" is beautiful, and "Wings of a Dove" is such an uplifting song. But this "Driving in My Car" was obviously the song that we all used to sing in the playground, because it just had that instant hook to it, and they were fun, and we all wanted to be Madness, and everybody did the sort of in a line and kind of dance in the playground. They were very clever in the way they managed to mix these kind of party tunes in with things which were quite critical of the time and of politics at the time a little bit, and also very moving. And they wrote very, very well about, sorry, I messed up. They wrote very well about relationships.
Yeah, definitely. And I think actually as they went on a bit, their stuff got a bit more melancholic, actually. There are songs like One Better Day and things like that, which are, it's when they're becoming less and less popular, and the songs took a bit of a turn, not because of that, but I just think it was kind of more about them growing up. But they were still beautiful songs, quite sad, sort of, they sounded quite uplifting, but there was something quite sad to them, and it takes a lot of skill to do that. So what we'll do, I think we'll play you out with Madness. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week for the 80s part 2, 85 to 89. Here's Madness, Driving in My Car.
Park on a beanbag. Ha, ha, ha. I've been driving in my car. It don't look much, but I've been far. I drive up to Maswell Hill. I've even been to Selseybill. I drove along the A45. I had her up to 58. This copper stopped me the other day. Your mistake, what could I say? The tyres were a little worn, they were okay, I could have sworn. I like driving in my car. I'm satisfied I've got this far. I like driving in my car. It don't look much, but I've been far. I like driving in my car, even with a flat tire. I like driving in my car. It's not quite a Jaguar. I like driving in my car. I'm satisfied I've got this far.
Radio Lewes. Local community webcasting.